You, yes, you, the one who learned to keep your face still when the storm hits, the one who tells yourself, don't complain, don't react, be above it. You call it discipline, you call it maturity, you call it Stoicism. But ask yourself quietly and without the armor, is this strength, or is this fear wearing a suit and tie? We love Stoicism because it promises control in a world that laughs at our plans. 2,000 years after Epictetus, the idea still seduces us. If you master your response, you can survive anything. If you focus only on what you can control, nothing can break you. That sounds like freedom. But sometimes what we call freedom is a beautifully decorated cage. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Stoicism, misapplied, becomes a mask that suffocates the very person it was meant to protect. It turns tenderness into weakness, anger into immaturity, grief into drama. It polishes a statue where a living human should stand, and statues don't bleed, but they also don't love. Let me tell you a story. A man I'll call Daniel prides himself on being unshakable. When his partner tells him she feels lonely, he breathes, nods, and says, "I understand." He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't interrupt. He is a model of calm. Weeks pass. The loneliness becomes distance. Distance becomes silence, and silence becomes a goodbye text at 2:13 a.m. Daniel is stunned. "But I never once lost control," he says. Exactly. He never lost control. He also never let himself feel. He hid behind Stoicism and called it virtue. The classical Stoics spoke about apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from destructive passions. They taught the dichotomy of control. There are things you can control, your judgments, your intentions, and things you cannot, the weather, other people, your mortality. This is profound. But like a medicine taken at the wrong dose, it can poison. Because the boundary between destructive passion and human emotion is not a clean line. Anger can be poison, but it can also be a compass pointing toward injustice. Fear can be paralysis, but it can also be a signal to prepare. Grief can drown you, but it can also baptize you into a deeper love for what remains. Nietzsche saw the danger of turning life into a spreadsheet of composure. He mocked the Stoic dream of aligning oneself with nature by ironing out chaos. To him, life was ferocious, musical, volcanic, meant to be danced with, not managed like a budget. Amor fati, the love of one's fate, becomes a jail sentence if it is practiced as resignation rather than creative embrace. If you tell yourself, "This is my fate," when in fact it is a boundary you're too afraid to set, you aren't loving fate. You're abandoning yourself. And then there's modern society, which has discovered a very profitable use for your calm. Workplaces preach resilience while quietly lengthening the workday. Don't take it personally, managers say, while cutting the team in half. Control what you can control, they repeat, while removing the very levers you could have pulled. When Stoicism becomes a corporate policy, endurance mutates into obedience. A tranquil workforce is easy to exploit. Machiavelli understood this from the other side of the chessboard. Power bends to those who act, not those who endure indefinitely. Patience has a purpose when it creates space for strategy. But patience without a plan is just waiting dressed up as virtue. If your tranquility keeps you from renegotiating a toxic contract, leaving a loveless relationship, or saying a necessary no, it isn't virtue. It is fear practicing good posture. There is a psychological price to this counterfeit composure. When you chronically suppress emotion, your body keeps the receipt. Sleeplessness, tight jaws, clenched stomachs, headaches that pretend to be weather. Emotions are not enemies to be defeated. They are messages. Pain says, something is wrong. Anger says, a boundary is being crossed. Sadness says, you lost something that mattered. If you silence the messenger, the message doesn't disappear. It goes underground. It grows teeth. Consider Bonhoeffer's warning during the rise of the Third Reich. The danger is not only evil, but a kind of obedient stupidity that allows evil to walk unopposed. What happens when a culture baptizes endurance and calls it wisdom? We train citizens to accept what should be fought. We reward the appearance of calm over the courage of conscience. We produce people who would rather meditate through a fire than pick up water. The irony is that Stoicism, at its best, never demanded numbness. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself in the middle of plague and war, not to erase his humanity, but to harness it. He cried, he doubted, he loved his children, and mourned those he lost. Epictetus spoke of focusing on one's judgments precisely because he knew pain can overwhelm. The point was never to become stone. The point was to remain free in the middle of life's storms. When we forget this, we don't become Stoics. We become statues. Let's get very specific. Here are signs your Stoicism has taken a dark turn. You use focus on what you can control to avoid necessary conversations. If your partner is hurt and you respond with a lecture on locus of control, you're not wise. You're hiding. You call every strong feeling irrational. Not every intensity is a tantrum. Some intensities are truth trying to get out. You weaponize quotes from dead philosophers to win arguments you're too scared to have as a human being. You pride yourself on never crying, and yet you wake each night with your teeth grinding. You preach acceptance, but your acceptance never asks you to act. It asks only that you endure. You're quick to forgive, not because you've processed the wound, but because you fear conflict more than you love justice. You use amor fati to romanticize a life you would leave if you believed you deserved better. If any of this stings, let it. Pain is data. What matters is what you do with it. Let me offer another story. A woman, call her Sophia, grows up in a family that worships calm. We don't raise our voices, they say. We're strong. When her father dies, she organizes the funeral, speaks eloquently, smiles for the out-of-town relatives, and thanks everyone for coming. She is praised for her grace. She returns home, folds the suits back in plastic, and sits on the edge of her bed with a pain that has no words. She tells herself, I should be grateful for the years we had. Gratitude is beautiful. It is not a substitute for grief. For weeks, she stays strong. Then one afternoon, washing a cup, she hears the exact sound the spoon made when her father stirred tea. The cup slips, she sinks to the floor, and finally cries. That cry does not undo her strength. It baptizes it. The premeditation of evils, a Stoic practice, aims to inoculate the mind by imagining what could go wrong. Used well, it prepares courage. Used compulsively, it becomes anxiety with Latin subtitles. If your morning routine is a rehearsal for disaster, you aren't practicing wisdom. You're catastrophizing. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the presence of values larger than fear. Which brings us to a crucial distinction. Acceptance and resignation are not twins. Acceptance tells the truth about what is. Resignation surrenders the truth about what could be. Plato helps here, surprisingly. In the Republic, he sketches a soul with 3 parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. The wise life is not a dictatorship of reason, it's harmony. Spirit, thumos, is the fire that defends what is precious. Appetite brings color, hunger, music. Reason conducts. When Stoicism banishes spirit and appetite, calling them unruly, it doesn't produce harmony. It produces a thin, tuneless life that can follow rules but cannot sing. How do we reclaim the power of Stoicism without becoming prisoners of it? By running every calm through 4 questions. Is my calm chosen, or is it automatic? If it's automatic, it might be avoidance. Does my calm keep me connected to others, or does it isolate me? If it isolates, it's likely pride wearing a halo. Does my calm create space for wise action, or does it replace action? Calm that replaces action is sedation. Does my calm honor my body's signals, or does it silence them? Silence will always demand a debt later. Let's talk about masculinity for a moment. Many men are taught a counterfeit stoicism early. Don't cry, don't need, don't ask. This is not strength, it is emotional malnutrition. It creates boys who grow into men who cannot name what they feel, who confuse rage with honesty, who apologize with gifts because words terrify them. Stoicism can heal this by creating dignity and boundaries. But used as a muzzle, it punishes the very vulnerability required for love. Women, too, are policed by another face of the same demand. Be agreeable, be calm, be small. A society that worships composure will always call a woman hysterical for daring to name her pain and a man weak for daring to show his. There is also the spiritual temptation to confuse serenity with sanctity. You meditate, you journal in perfect cursive, you quote Marcus Aurelius over a cup of tea, and you begin to believe that peace proves virtue. But some of the most peaceful people in history achieved their peace by refusing to look at the world's wounds. They floated above the fire. Others were peaceful because they had already chosen to walk into the fire. One piece is perfume, the other is scar tissue. Ask yourself which kind you want. So what do? We practice a stoicism that bleeds. We keep the tools and drop the armor. Here is a framework, 3 movements to try this week. Movement 1, honest contact. Sit for 10 minutes with a feeling you usually outrun. Name it. Where is it in the body? Heat in the face? Tightness in the throat? What does it want you to notice? Write 2 pages, by hand, not arguing with the feeling, not diagnosing it, just letting it speak. This is not indulgence, it is reconnaissance. Movement 2, value-linked decision. Pick one arena where you've been serenely enduring. Write the smallest action that would honor your values there. Not the most dramatic. The smallest. Send the email asking for the raise. Say, I'm not available to talk that way when the joke crosses a line. Schedule the therapy session. Stoicism should shorten the distance between clarity and action, not lengthen it. Movement 3, courage ritual. Before a hard conversation, borrow the Stoic breath, slow inhale, slower exhale, and then add a line Nietzsche would respect. I choose the discomfort that makes me larger. Repeat it 3 times. Courage is a muscle. Train it on purpose. There's one more trap to expose. Memento mori. Remember you will die. This can wake you up, or it can seduce you into nihilism. Nothing matters. But death does not erase meaning. It concentrates it. If everything is passing, every day becomes a moral vote. How you speak to the barista, whether you call your mother back, whether you tell the truth when lying would be cleaner. A living stoicism is not a cold distance from life. It is a fierce intimacy with each moment, because you know none of them will return. If you need a picture for your mind, use this. Healthy stoicism is a lighthouse, still, bright guiding ships through a storm to a shore where real choices can be made. Dark stoicism is a freezer, cold, hard, preserving you in a shape that looks noble but cannot move. The sea doesn't need more statues under it. It needs lights. But perhaps the deepest twist is this. The opposite of stoicism isn't chaos. It's tenderness. Not the tenderness of collapse, but the tenderness of presence, the willingness to be touched by your own life. Courage is not always the roar of the lion. Sometimes it is the quiet sentence that trembles but still gets spoken. Sometimes it is the tear you let fall in front of your son, so he learns that strength and softness are siblings, not enemies. Let us return to Daniel. Months after the breakup, he begins to notice the crater where his heart should be. He is excellent at work. He is reliable with friends. He has mastered everything except himself. One night he opens his phone, scrolls through old photos, and feels the thaw. He doesn't journal about preferred indifference. He does not rank his impressions. He simply says out loud, to no one, I miss you. I'm sorry I hid. The sentence hurts. It also heals. The next day, he calls his boss to renegotiate his workload, and later he texts his ex, not to win her back, but to apologize for the ways he disappeared behind perfect composure. For the first time in years, his calm is not a wall. It is a floor he can stand on while he moves. Plato would call this harmonizing the soul. Nietzsche would call it saying yes to life. Bonhoeffer would call it responsibility. The labels matter less than the direction, toward reality, toward action, toward love that doesn't need to pretend it's made of marble. So here is your challenge, and it is simple, only on paper. Identify one place where your calm is hiding your fear. Name the fear aloud. Tell one truth this week that you have been postponing. Keep it short, keep it kind, but tell it. Choose one discomfort that serves your larger life. Put it on the calendar. Treat it like an appointment with your future self. Keep one Stoic practice that truly helps: a morning reflection, the dichotomy of control, the evening review, and pair it with one relational practice you usually avoid: an apology, a boundary, a request. If this sounds small, good. Philosophy that cannot fit into a Tuesday afternoon is not philosophy. It is theater. In the end, the dark side of Stoicism is not the philosophy itself. It's the story we tell with it. A story where we are noble because we don't need anyone, where our silence is dignity and our numbness is virtue, where endurance replaces imagination. You do not need that story anymore. Be stone when you choose, not because you are afraid to be flesh. Let your composure be a bridge, not a bunker. Feel deeply, think clearly, act bravely. And when the next wave rises, and it will, don't hide behind quotations. Stand in the water as a human being. Breathe, listen, decide, move, not a statue, a soul.